What the hell happened to this place? Jason Callahan muttered under his breath as he stared at the stack of customer complaints on his desk. The numbers weren't bad. 13 diners across the state, steady profits, but lately something felt off. Reviews had turned cold, not angry just. Disappointed. Words like rushed, sloppy, and unwelcome showed up too many times. Jason had bought the diner chain 7 years ago from a retired couple. Back then, it was all about home-style comfort, fast service, and treating people right. He'd spent years building it up, delegating to district managers, hiring local managers, and staying mostly behind the scenes. But maybe he'd stayed too far behind. He rubbed his temples. No more filters. He picked one of the locations at random Store 9, a mid-sized diner tucked between a highway exit and a strip mall. No major complaints from corporate, but a few lukewarm reviews on service. The kind of place that could slip under the radar. Jason decided to go in as a customer. No clipboard, no cameras, just him. He grew out his beard a little, dyed it darker. Threw on a faded hoodie and worn jeans. Added some reading glasses. Not a disguise exactly, just enough to look like a regular guy. Most of the staff had never met him. A few might have seen a photo in an email once. But with over 100 employees across 13 stores, he was just the CEO, a name on a check. He drove to Store 9 on a rainy Thursday morning. The parking lot was half full. He stepped in, dripping from the light drizzle, and slid quietly into a corner booth near the kitchen. Nobody looked twice. A young waitress with tired eyes and blonde curls tied into a messy bun walked over with a notepad. "Welcome in. Coffee," Jason nodded. "Please." She poured him a cup, slid a menu onto the table. "My name's Rena. I'll be with you in a sec." He watched her hustle across the floor, checking on tables, running plates, refilling drinks. The only other server on shift, a lanky guy in his 20s, leaned against the counter near the soda machine, scrolling on his phone. Jason's gaze narrowed. Rena passed the kid, lowered her voice. "Come on, Evan. That table's been waiting 10 minutes. Evan didn't even look up. "I'm on break." "You're not on break. You haven't done anything since we opened." Evan shrugged. "Not my fault, you always do everything." She sighed. "The boss would fire you if he saw this." Jason's heart paused. He leaned in slightly. Evan scoffed. "Please." "Alan doesn't care as long as we hit numbers. And the big guy, corporate, he doesn't even show up." Jason kept his face calm, eyes down. Alan, that was the store manager. Jason had only met him once years ago. Rena walked away, jaw tight, rubbing at her temple. Jason watched. She was quick, polite, and kind even when customers were rude. A toddler knocked over a glass of juice. Rena got down on her knees to clean it and made the kid laugh. When an older couple asked about their food, she apologized and checked on it personally. She was carrying the floor. Alone. Eventually, Alan came out from the back, a stocky man in his 40s with slicked back hair and a loud voice. Jason listened carefully. "Rena, you forgot to upsell the pie again," Alan barked from across the diner. "I've been covering 4 tables by myself," she said, trying to keep her tone even. "Well, that's your job. If you can't handle it, maybe we need someone who can." Jason felt his jaw tighten. Alan walked past Evan without a word. Evan was still on his phone. Jason stayed for another hour, quietly watching. He ordered a sandwich, lukewarm, messy. Rena apologized. "Sorry, kitchen's backed up," he nodded. "You're doing great." She gave a tired smile and moved on. When Jason got up to pay at the front, Alan was behind the counter, chatting with a delivery guy. Jason handed over his cash. Alan barely looked at him. "Keep the change," Jason said. Rena caught his eye briefly. "Thanks for being patient," she said, almost under her breath. Jason nodded, then walked out into the rain. He sat in his car for a long time, staring at the windshield. Something was broken here. Not just one lazy server or a rude manager, something deeper. Culture, standards, respect, and it had his name on it. He picked up his phone and called his assistant. "Clear my schedule next week," he said. "I'm going undercover at Store 9. As a trainee, I want to work the floor." "You're serious?" Jason stared at the diner through the rain. I'm dead serious. Jason arrived just before 6 the next morning, parked around the back and stepped through the employee entrance. No one noticed him at first. The kitchen lights were on, the griddle already hissing. He carried a small backpack and wore a plain black t-shirt, jeans, and a cap. Simple, clean, forgettable. Alan stood near the prep table with a clipboard in hand. He glanced up when Jason walked in. "You the new guy?" Alan asked, not bothering to introduce himself. "Yeah," Jason said. "I'm Jace." Alan gave a quick once-over. "You ever worked a diner line? Did some food service in college," Jason replied, keeping his tone neutral. "Fine. We're short today, so you'll shadow Rena. She's front of house. Just don't slow her down." Jason nodded. "Got it?" Alan turned and walked off without another word. Rena showed up 10 minutes later, tying her apron as she walked in. Her eyes were puffy, like she hadn't slept well. She looked at Jason, clearly surprised. "You're the trainee?" "Yeah, Jace," she nodded slowly. "Okay. You'll be running support, mostly drinks, clearing, maybe some tables if it gets packed. Just stick close." The shift started quietly. A few early regulars came in: truckers, construction crews, a pair of nurses from the night shift. Jason followed Rena's lead, filling coffee, grabbing toast, resetting booths. She worked quickly but stayed calm, giving him quiet instructions as she moved. Evan showed up 30 minutes late, strolled in with headphones around his neck, and clocked in without a word. Rena didn't say anything this time. She just glanced at the clock. Jason watched as Evan casually wiped down one table, then leaned against the soda station again. Rena took 7 tables in a row without him lifting a finger. At one point, Jason brought a tray of juice to a table of 4. As he turned to leave, he heard one of the customers whisper to another, "Is this place just letting anyone work here now?" He paused. The man's tone wasn't just rude, it was condescending, aimed directly at Jason's appearance. Jason made eye contact with him briefly. The man looked away. Rena noticed too. When they got back behind the counter, she leaned in. "You okay?" Jason nodded. "Yeah, happens sometimes." She hesitated. "You know, if anyone gives you crap like that again, you tell me. Appreciate it." Rena glanced toward the kitchen. "It wasn't always like this. We had a good team a year ago. Then people started leaving and Alan stopped hiring replacements. Now we're just keeping it afloat." Jason didn't respond. He just kept working. By mid-morning, the diner was packed. Jason ran drinks, cleared dishes, and wiped tables as fast as he could. Rena barely had time to breathe. Alan sat in the corner booth for most of the rush, eating scrambled eggs and tapping on his phone. He didn't check on the floor, didn't speak to a single guest. Jason dropped off a plate at a table near the front when a customer called him over. "This came out cold," the woman said, frowning at her eggs. "I'm sorry," Jason said. "I'll get it remade." He brought the plate to the kitchen and passed it to the cook, a quiet man named Lewis. "Table 6 needs a hot plate," Jason said. Lewis looked up, confused. "That order went out 20 minutes ago," Jason nodded. "Yeah, it was cold." Alan walked by just then. "What's the problem?" Jason kept his voice even. "Guest got cold eggs. We're remaking it." Alan waved a hand. "Tell her to deal with it. We're backed up." Jason stared at him. "She's a paying customer," Alan scoffed. "Not like she's gonna tip big anyway." Lewis froze. Rena, who had just stepped into the kitchen, stopped mid-step. Jason's voice dropped. "What does that mean?" Alan turned. "It means we don't have time to babysit picky customers." Jason looked at Lewis. "Can you remake it?" Lewis nodded. "Yeah." Alan spun toward him. "Nope, don't waste product. Jace, go tell her we're not redoing it." Jason didn't move. Rena stepped forward. "I'll handle it." Alan pointed at her. "Don't start." Rena didn't back down. "You're telling us not to fix cold food because it's inconvenient," Alan glared. "Watch your tone." Jason watched the exchange carefully. Alan's posture, his tone, this wasn't just a one-off. This was how he ran the place. Rena walked out without waiting for permission. The rush tapered off around noon. Rena stood at the soda station, stretching her shoulders. Jason walked over with 2 empty mugs. "You okay?" "I'm used to it," he nodded. "You shouldn't have to be." She wiped her hands. "If I call him out, I get my hours cut." Last time I asked for help, he gave my weekend shifts to Evan. Jason looked over. Evan was sitting on a milk crate in the back hallway, eating fries out of a paper basket. Jason lowered his voice. Why doesn't Ellen get rid of him? His cousin or brother-in-law? Something like that. Jason didn't respond, but his jaw set slightly. A woman in her late 40s came in around one. She wore a blue uniform and sat near the window. Rena greeted her warmly. Hey, Mrs. Carter, the usual, the woman smiled. Please? Jason brought over her coffee. She looked at him kindly. New here, starting out. Stick with Rena. She keeps this place from falling apart. Jason smiled faintly. Seems like it. Later, as Jason wiped down a booth near the entrance, he overheard Alan talking to another employee near the back hallway. I don't care what she says. If she mouths off again, I'll dump her to weekdays only. The other employee mumbled something. Jason didn't catch it. Alan continued, she thinks being nice to customers makes her untouchable. Wait till she sees her hours next week. Jason stepped outside briefly to clear his head. He stood near the dumpsters, watching the wind blow wrappers across the pavement. Inside, a young dishwasher had just arrived, barely 16, with nervous eyes and a name tag that read Marcus. Jason caught him staring at the chaos in the kitchen. You knew too? Jason asked. Marcus nodded slowly. First job, Jason offered a hand. Jace, Marcus shook it. Just keep your head down, Jason said. And listen to Rena. Marcus looked relieved. Okay. By 3, the floor had thinned out. Jason helped restock condiments and wipe down the counters. Rena finally sat for a few minutes, sipping a glass of water in silence. Jason sat across from her quietly. How long you been here? 3 years. Why stay? She didn't answer right away. I've got a kid, schedule's flexible, close to home. Jason nodded. She looked at him. You ever work somewhere where you had to carry everybody else? Jason thought about that. Not in a long time. She smiled faintly. Then you're lucky. Alan walked by just then, looked at the two of them and narrowed his eyes. Jace, go take out the trash. And don't sit during shift. Jason stood without a word and walked toward the back. As he opened the back door, he heard Alan mutter to himself. New hires think they can just lounge around. Rena's teaching him bad habits. Jason stepped into the alley, let the door swing shut behind him, and exhaled. It was time. He pulled out his phone and texted his assistant 3 words. Set the meeting, tomorrow. Alan was going to meet the real boss. Jason arrived early again, just past 5. The alley behind the diner was quiet except for the hum of the building's exhaust fans. He stood outside for a few minutes, watching the sky shift from dark blue to a pale, early gray. The morning crew hadn't arrived yet, except for Lewis, who nodded once when Jason entered through the back. Jason changed in the employee restroom, pulled on his apron, and started prepping the coffee station. It was quiet, calm briefly. Then the pressure returned with the morning crowd. Rena came in looking like she hadn't slept. She didn't speak much, just gave him a glance and a small wave before heading straight to the register. Jason moved with purpose, refilling sugars, setting up menus, checking the restrooms. He already knew how this day needed to end. By 8, the floor was full. Customers packed the booths and counter stools. Jason had been running drinks since 6:30, and the back of his shirt was already damp. He moved with focus, clearing plates and delivering orders, but his eyes stayed fixed on the front, waiting. Alan arrived at 9:15, 15 minutes later than the schedule taped on the office door. Jason watched him walk in like he owned the air in the room. He didn't look at the customers, didn't acknowledge Lewis or Rena. Just walked behind the counter, grabbed a cup of coffee and planted himself at the far end of the bar. Jason waited until the lunch prep was underway. Then he slipped into the office and picked up the landline. The call was short. 15 seconds. At 10:30, a black sedan pulled into the back lot. A woman in her 40s stepped out, holding a clipboard and wearing a navy button-up with the corporate logo. Her name was Carla, head of HR and compliance. Jason met her by the rear entrance. She looked surprised to see him in the apron. He held up a finger. 5 minutes. Just let me finish something. She nodded and stepped aside. Back out front, Jason walked to Rena, who was at the register ringing up a check. Can you meet me in the office for a minute? He asked her quietly. She looked puzzled. Sure, he turned toward Alan. You too. Alan raised an eyebrow. What's this about? Jason didn't answer. He just walked. Inside the office, Carla was already seated, legs crossed, pen resting across her lap. Rena glanced between them, confused. Alan leaned on the doorframe. I don't have time for this. Lunch rush is starting. Jason took off his hat and apron, set them on the desk, and looked Alan in the eye. I'm Jason Callahan. I own this company. Rena's eyes widened. She didn't speak. Alan laughed a sharp, dismissive sound. Yeah, right. Jason didn't move. Check with Carla. Carla stood. It's true, he's the CEO. Alan's mouth opened, then closed. He straightened, suddenly unsure of what to do with his hands. Jason turned to Rena. You're welcome to stay for this or step out. Your call. She looked between them, then took a seat. Jason faced Alan again. I've spent the last 2 days working under you. I've seen how you operate. I've watched your staff scramble to keep this place running while you sit, bark orders, and ignore basic responsibilities. Alan opened his mouth, but Jason raised a hand. No. You don't get to speak yet. Alan lowered his gaze. You've let one employee consistently avoid work. That same employee disrespected customers, ignored assignments, and you protected him because of some personal connection. You've cut hours from your best staff while rewarding laziness. You ignored food quality issues. You refused to remake cold meals. And yesterday you made a comment suggesting that some customers don't deserve decent service based on their appearance. Alan shifted uncomfortably. That's not what Jason cut him off again. You said it, in front of staff. In front of me? Silence. Jason stepped closer. You run this store like a petty kingdom, but it's not yours, it's mine, and I won't let anyone treat my staff or my customers like they're disposable. He turned to Carla. Terminate him, effective immediately, final check. No severance? Carla nodded once. Already prepared. Alan looked stunned. You can't just fire me in front of everyone. Jason didn't blink. I just did. You can collect your things and leave through the back. If you cause a scene, security will escort you. Rena sat frozen, hands on her lap. Jason turned to her. You didn't have to stand up for me yesterday, but you did, and I noticed. She blinked. I didn't know who you were. That's what made it matter. He sat beside her. You've kept this place running under a manager who didn't support you. You trained new staff. You covered shifts. You dealt with complaints that weren't your fault, all while being told to shut up and do more. Rena looked down, her throat tightening. Jason continued, voice calm. Starting today, you're the interim floor lead. You'll help Carla with scheduling while we hire a new manager. You'll get a raise, and you'll set the tone for how this store treats its people. She swallowed hard, then nodded. Jason stood. I'm not done. I'll be here the rest of the week, working the floor, listening, fixing what's broken. Rena exhaled slowly and stood with him. Alan was still frozen near the door. Carla stepped next to him, handed him an envelope, and gestured toward the hallway. He left without a word. Jason turned to Rena. You good to finish the shift? She nodded slowly. Yeah, thank you. He stepped back out to the floor. The lunch crowd was already forming. Jason tied on his apron and started pouring drinks. Word spread quickly, though no one said it aloud. Evan had vanished, his apron hung sloppily on a hook near the soda machine. A few other employees exchanged glances but kept working. By noon, the place ran differently, not perfectly but better. Jason moved through the floor, not as a secret anymore, but as part of the team. Customers still waited. Orders still took time, but the energy had changed. Near 2, Lewis passed Jason a sandwich for table 12 and said, Didn't think I'd see that day. Jason grinned. Me neither. Later, as Jason wiped down a booth near the front, a regular customer leaned over. You the new manager? Jason shook his head. Just someone who should have come back sooner. The man nodded. Well, tell whoever made the changes it's better already. Jason gave a small nod and kept cleaning. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw Rena training Marcus on the order system, showing him how to check modifiers and clock in tips. She was patient, clear, and steady. He didn't interrupt. He just watched the store start to breathe again. The next 3 days unfolded like a slow, necessary exhale. Jason worked the morning shifts with Rena, side by side, blending into the rhythm of the diner without stepping over her lead. He moved quietly, clearing tables, refilling drinks, helping Louis in the kitchen when the line backed up, but his presence changed things. Not because he micromanaged, but because he listened and followed through. By the second morning, Carla had posted a temporary shift board on the back wall near the lockers. Rena now had oversight of scheduling and coverage, a role she approached with quiet precision. She didn't try to fix everything at once. She adjusted the flow, spread the weight, made sure no one carried more than they could. Jason noticed how she paired newer hires with stronger staff, not to punish but to balance. It wasn't about efficiency, it was about keeping people from burning out. Evan never returned. After he abandoned his post, Jason left instructions with HR to terminate him formally and flag his personnel file. Carla followed up with the regional team to prevent future rehiring under any related accounts. Quietly, firmly, it was handled. The floor didn't collapse without him. If anything, the air felt lighter. Marcus, the dishwasher, started to find his rhythm. He was tentative at first, still watching everyone for cues, but Rena gave him small tasks outside the kitchen, carrying silverware bins, learning the basics of bussing. Jason noticed how she never gave him more than he could handle. One afternoon, Jason found Marcus scrubbing a booth edge with a damp cloth, unprompted. "Someone left syrup on the side," he said, almost apologetically. Jason nodded once. "Good eye." That was the most praise Marcus had ever received on a job, and it landed deeper than it should have. After that, he didn't stop moving. Jason held a closed-door meeting with Louis on the second night, after the last ticket was punched. Louis stood with his back to the sink, arms folded, unsure what to expect. Jason poured 2 waters, handed one over. "I owe you an apology," Jason said. Louis looked confused. "For what?" "For letting someone like Alan stay in charge this long. You've been keeping the kitchen steady without support, and that wasn't your job alone." Louis lowered his eyes. "I kept my head down, figured the less I said, the better. I get that. But going forward, you won't have to." Jason offered him a training stipend to help onboard new kitchen staff across 2 nearby locations. Not a promotion, not added hours, just recognition and trust. Louis accepted it with a quiet nod, then returned to cleaning his station. He didn't say much, but the way he carried himself changed after that. By Friday, Jason had seen enough to move from observation to implementation. He called a full staff meeting before the lunch rush. No corporate banners, no stage. Just everyone gathered in the dining area, seated in booths or leaning against counter stools. Carla stood off to the side, clipboard tucked under her arm. Jason stood in the center, sleeves rolled, apron still tied. "I owe all of you something," he began. "An explanation." The room quieted. "I built this company on the idea that small things matter. The way we treat each other, the way we treat guests. Somewhere along the line, I lost sight of that. I trusted reports, numbers, and people who didn't live the daily grind." He paused. "What I saw here this week, what I felt, wasn't in any spreadsheet. It was in how hard some of you fought to keep this place from slipping, and how others made it harder." A few heads turned subtly toward the kitchen corridor where Alan used to lean. Jason continued. "That's on me. I let someone run this store without the right values, without accountability. That won't happen again." He turned to Rena. "This store needs leadership that earns respect, not demands it, which is why, starting next month, Rena will be the new store manager." There was a beat of silence. Then someone clapped, then another, and soon the room filled with it, quiet but genuine. Rena raised her hand slightly. "I'm not someone who makes speeches," she said, and a few staff chuckled. "But I promise I'll listen, I'll work. And I'll never ask you to do something I wouldn't do myself." Jason let the applause settle before speaking again. "There's more. We're reviewing pay rates across all 13 locations. Starting here, Lewis, your kitchen rate is going up, so is Marcus's. And we're bringing in 2 new hires next week to avoid putting this kind of strain on anyone again. Marcus's eyes widened. He hadn't expected to be mentioned. Jason nodded at him. You showed up. You stayed late. You kept going even when no one told you to. That's not invisible here anymore. He turned back to the group. There will be changes, not all of them easy, but they'll be fair. If you've got ideas, bring them. If something's broken, say so. I'll be back. Not just for audits, I mean back on the floor, in the kitchen, in the booths. Because I don't ever want to lose sight of what this place really is. He stepped back. That's it. Let's get ready to open. The team scattered, some heading to the kitchen, others resetting the floor. The tension that had hung in the air for so long was gone, replaced by something steadier. Not excitement, not relief, just something calm. Earned, later that day, Jason sat in the same booth where he'd first watched Rena run the floor alone. He sipped a cup of black coffee, quietly observing, not as a mystery guest, not as a CEO. Just as someone who'd finally stopped looking from a distance. Rena passed by, checking on a table of 3. She caught his eye briefly. You still good on coffee? She asked, half smiling. Jason raised his cup slightly. Best I've had all week. She moved on, no fanfare, just back to work. And that was exactly how it should be.